when I was in college days, actually some things have stuck in my mind so profoundly that even while I make decisions today, I go back to those memories, you know. Like for example, I think when we were very young in college, Bunyad and Hum Log were the series. So we used to get glued to TV and see those. Tamas was another serial I remember, which was kind of scary in that sense. Scary in the sense it made us reflect so much about our past, about history, but then we were kind of glued to that. In cinemas, I remember Earth. Probably it is also your mental setup, the situations that you are in, the things make impact on you, probably. So Earth made lot of impact. And especially, I don't remember much about the entire film, but the last scene where she talks about her identity and her independence, that is stuck with me. And when I got introduced with Vinta and learned that she was she made Tara, which in my memory was the first women-centric serial. So I was so happy. So these kind of memories, these kind of impacts are there. And when I started working at the Grassroots 29 years ago with an organization that I co-founded called CORO, Committee of Resource Organizations, which started working with adult literacy cause, but then women empowerment and gender equality was at the core of everything that we did. And then we landed into changing paradigms at the grassroots by facilitating grassroots leadership. Actually, people who are making impact and who are making change at the grassroots and who are always seen as beneficiaries or implementers, kind of a demeaning thing. So we wanted to shift that paradigm there and see how they can be seen as grassroots leaders and change makers and change leaders. So developed a grassroots leadership program here. While working in the community, this was, I'm talking about 91, 92, when we started with adult literacy work, there were new videos had come. So people used to watch 3 movies overnight and then sleep in the morning in the communities, you know. So, and then actually when people use, especially women, use TV characters as their arguments, it becomes so difficult to deal. I mean, I remember during discussions, women were saying, but Parvati ne aisa nahi kiya. Parvati didn't do like this, some Parvati character. So actually, some of the characters were so regressive and were endorsing so regressive stereotypes, but women would say, oh, I mean, she did this, so that becomes kind of justification. And that's very difficult because there is something called collective unconscious that needs no rational, no reflection, nothing. So it's there, kind of thing. So when that comes into your intellectual and emotional justifications and argument, then it becomes very difficult to deal with. So that we have experienced while doing with literacy thing. And then I also saw there are so many indigenous leaders. I have seen people changing profoundly in an incredible way. But they don't catch imagination of their near peers in their near communities. And probably that is because their stories don't get made larger than life. You know, they don't become disseminable, they don't become communicable. So they don't get that kind of respect in this sense. And so because we are talking about grassroots leadership today, before going to the panelists, I was saying why we started this grassroots leadership. I mean, how is very easy part of that, but why we started. And I think that applies to all of us. It's not just for the grassroots people. So what refrains us from being who we are? I mean, and what we want to say, why don't we say what we want to say? Why don't we do what we want to do? And there is some kind of fear, there is some kind of sense of identity that refrains us from doing what we want to do. So actually while working, we realized that if we address this sense of identity, sense of self, the fragmented sense of identity, if we deal with that, if we address that, and if we try and eliminate the diffidence in that sense, that people have, then people do wonders. And that happens with all of us. And the leadership program primarily does that. I mean, it addresses the sense of fragmented identity or fragmented sense of identity of individual that makes them helpless, thinks that they are not worthy enough, they are not able to contribute anything. And when that sense changes, actually people do wonders. One of my colleagues and friend, actually who ran to police station, doused with kerosene that was poured on her, just because she wanted to get out of violent marriage. She's a Muslim. So and then she seeks some help, she seeks organizational help, and there is a big journey that happens, big journey of transformation that happens. And in 2015, she is amongst 100 most influential women in BBC's Global Women's List. Actually, so much drama, so much drama. If the entertainment requires the drama, it's all there. It's all a real-time story, real life story. But still it doesn't get catch up in the way it should be portrayed. It should be inspirational. It should be kind of role model to others. And in that sense, I first wanted to go to Gajra actually, because Balika Vadhu was our favorite, and it was favorite of many social activists, I think. So Gajra, to you, actually, sometimes we found, I mean, that the story started very well, but somehow quite a few of us had a feeling that it was coming on the return track, etc. So I just wanted you to say about the processes, if there are any challenges, etc. in this.
Sure. Thank you, Sujata. Well, I think I'm at some kind of, I'm prepared for a lot of sort of arrows coming my way, because as a maker, and people don't have very nice things to say about television serials in general, and I don't blame them. But there's a lot that really goes on behind the scenes. I'd just like to share a small bit about my personal journey first. My first successful show, which was very acclaimed, was a show called Acee-thethirdeye Ek Prem Kahani. Now that was, I think, just after Tara. In fact, Vinta had a huge role at that point of time in getting it through. And it was such a bold theme that, you know, entire team actually felt that it cannot last more than 6 months. And we were on air for over 3 years. So that itself was a big achievement. But personally, it was much easier for me to relate to the protagonist of that show. She was an urban woman, she was a working woman, and she was walking that tightrope between wanting a good, happy family life, as well as maintaining a career, which I think was a very advanced thought for 15 years or 18 years ago. When Balika Vadhu came to me, as in the creator, the one whose concept it is, Mr. Purnendu Shekhar. So when he came to me, we had worked together on this very emancipated show together earlier. And I said a lot of no's to this show, because I felt initially that I pride myself in being a writer who first must feel about the cause. You know, later I read about the Sabido method in Mexico, etc., where the entire focus is on making your audience feel rather than think, because the thinking can come at a later stage, or the thinking is more subliminal, but they must feel for your characters. And I wasn't honestly feeling for this child bride. I didn't come from that kind of a background. I wasn't giving my daughter that kind of an upbringing. And then I took it as a mere challenge, and I kind of as I did more and more research, I found that my notions about it doesn't really happen in India, or who would like to see a show about this? I had all those questions which I get asked now. Now, the only way you can battle this, and I'm not saying I've been 100% successful, but even if I've been 50% successful, is that at least I empathized. If I as a writer do not feel how do I expect my viewers to feel and my viewers to think? So I forced myself, I trained myself to feel for the subject, the characters, the peripheral characters, etc. And then I could at least battle to quite an extent with the forces that pull you down. Of course, increasingly it's becoming very, very difficult. There's a lot of gloss, there were a lot of tricks which we did in the show and which we have to do across all shows to make them more palatable. You know, out of the 7.5 years of Balika Vadhu, nearly 8, initially, because the show was getting good numbers, it was a very smooth run. But gradually, the entire scenario of the TRPs, monitoring, feedback coming to us, we had this, you know, minute by minute analysis of every episode. And so that was a very mind-boggling thing, because you are feeling for a certain character or a certain track, but when you're sitting to write your next lot of episodes, you're saying, this scene of this track and this character, the TRP has fallen. So should I really be writing this, or should I sideline this and go on to something else? So these were the kind of pressures that increased over the years. Even I'm talking about a long-running show like this. Initially it was a certain way, and it became more and more challenging to continue that way.
Mari, actually I wanted to come to you because you are Blue Runaway, you know, the WEvolve program. So that is also including men and women and challenging social norms that perpetuate violence against women. Again, so important, because anything that is so prevalent and established, challenging that is always a challenge, you know, in that sense. So can you speak more about this effort and also the response and challenges?
Okay, I want to explain that this program, WEvolve, was something that we created in the World Bank, where I had a 23-year career. And in my latter part of my career, I covered South Asia. And at the time, this was when the Delhi rape case in December 2012 happened. And it was following that in 2013, a major World Health Organization report was released that reported on the high level of incidence of violence faced by women, and namely that 1 in 3 women worldwide would face some kind of violence over their lifetimes. So we at the bank that were very hesitant to deal with political issues such as gender-based violence, particularly in a country such as India, when we have to work very closely with government counterparts. This was very tricky. And we decided to do what we do best, I guess, at the bank, which is we did a major report on gender-based violence in South Asia, and we convened groups in Nepal to discuss the issues and what could be done. But we felt compelled to do something bolder and something to be a bit more creative, given how prevalent the problem is and how horrific that particular incident was. And so we turned to the creative sector, as we felt at that time we had no experience actually working on any of this, and which is very different from all the colleagues in this room. But we felt strongly that if we were going to do something bold, it would be a collaboration with the creative sector. In the end, we did a number of things, among them the Blue Runway, which you mentioned. It was opportunistic, actually. There was an opportunity to work with Manish Malhotra, who was interested in the issue. He, of course, is iconic in India. He's known across socioeconomic classes. He is, of course, very influential in Bollywood itself. So it was a real opportunity to work with him. And he wanted to show that fashion could be used for a cause. And so this is where we launched the WEvolve program. And it was, as you mentioned, we were very explicit at the time that we were developing the program that we wanted to target both women and men. We see gender as an ecosystem in which we have both male and female participants. And in terms of gender-based violence, if we don't understand how and why violence is used, then we're not going to get at the issues. So that was the objective that we set for ourselves, and it was launched, as I mentioned, at the Blue Runway, which was successful. We had other opportunities to work in the fashion sector afterwards, but it was a way of introducing the theme in a high-profile manner in India. We did a number of other things as well. We produced a series of videos. Among others, we worked with Farhan Akhtar and the MARD group. This was an attempt to work on the male side with a very prominent figure, an excellent spokesperson on this issue. In fact, we're hoping to continue to work with him now into the future because of his influence and because he is such a leader on this issue. And we also we worked with the creator of Priya Shakti, which is an online comic book. Actually, it's India's first augmented comic book, and we co-funded the second version, which was on acid attacks. Very complex issue, of course. So. We dabbled, we were opportunistic, we produced these videos, we used social media, and we have a number of metrics which show the potential. The last video that we produced was also in the fashion industry, was with Elle India, and that particular video went viral in a week, 6 million hits. So we saw the potential. But again, at the time, I was, we're still working in the context of the large bureaucracy of the World Bank, and it was it was not easy to continue this kind of innovative program in the context of the bank. So I think the lasting, a number of the lessons that we learned is, first, there's many creative platforms that you can use, but we also saw a number of challenges, and in the end, it was a bit of a one-off in the context of the World Bank, and the challenge now is to see how we can use what we learned and try to scale up and build on the experiences that we developed in the WEvolve program.
So there are two aspects, I think, about working with men. One is bringing in men's issue. When somebody was talking about sexual abuse done on boys and how to bring that. So that is one thing. So bringing out what is happening with boys. And also in the context of gender-based violence, I would say, it is preparing men and empowering men to accept the empowerment of women in that sense. Because if we don't, men are part of problem, yes, but also part of solutions. So one has to bring them as partner on the table and have some discussion. So it's very important. So Noorjehan, actually, I want to come to you. And Noorjehan, she works so extensively with Muslim women and brings out different stories of Muslim women getting empowered, their issues.
I'm associated with the Bharatiya Muslim Mahila Andolan. And this organization, rather a movement, we started in 2007. And the whole idea was to create space for Muslim women to come out and talk about her issues. For multiple reasons, Muslim women in the community, for various political reasons, historical reasons, that kind of safe space has not been created within the community where Muslim women could say that these are her issues and this is how she wants to get it resolved. And also a lack of progressive voice, liberal voice within the community. For multiple reasons, we've had a kind of leadership which was very, very religious in nature. Everything was to be analyzed from the prism of religion, and what about a social prism, what about an economic prism, what about a cultural prism. Now that was kind of absent in our community. And we felt that this vacuum in leadership needs to be filled in by a very, very liberal, progressive voice. And we had to kind of come together and say that we are going to be leading the community. we will raise the issues of not just Muslim women, but also issues of the community, which are education, livelihood, security, a better family law, a lot of issues which confront the women, the youth, the children, basically bringing in the developmental paradigm into the whole discourse within the Muslim community. So with that purpose of creating an alternative voice, we started BMMA. And we had a huge response from Muslim women. I mean, they joined in large numbers. We have more than 1 lakh members right now. And we're working in 15 states, so it's huge response from Muslim women. And as we went along, we realized that a lot of Muslim men have joined us, a lot of Muslim men supporting us in all the issues that we take up. And right from the beginning, our focus has been to take up those issues which Muslim women are getting affected by. And this whole issue of law reform, where to get into the legal history, Muslim family law has not been codified. So just as you have the Hindu Marriage Act, the Christian Marriage Act, the Parsis also have their own family law. Muslims don't have one. And as a result, because there's no legal protection, there's no legal, there's no law, you have practices like triple divorce, you have practices like polygamy, you have practices of child marriage. And all these issues are linked to social development, but they are also linked to law. Legal protection is a right of all women, of all citizens. And Muslim women were deprived of this right. And so our campaign has been to codify, to demand a codified Muslim family law, which is based on the constitutional values of equality, justice, and also based on the Quran, because Quran has given a lot of rights to women, but if they are not converted into a law, then women cannot access it. So that has been our campaign for the last 11 years. And as a result, we've been able to, we filed a PIL last year against the practice of triple talaq. And the campaigns that we did in the last 11 years, the result of which is that we have now a bill which has been passed in the Lok Sabha against the practice of triple talaq. It's still pending in Rajya Sabha, and we are hoping that we'll get a good law at the end of the whole process. Again, a couple of years back, we also filed a PIL in the Mumbai High Court against the ban on women getting into the Haji Ali Dargah. And that went on till the Supreme Court, and Supreme Court also ruled in our favor. So the whole idea is that where is the women's voice within the community? Where is the Muslim women's perspective? Where is her opinion? And why is the community not willing to hear that? Why is the state and the government not willing to listen to this important voice? And so we had to raise our voice. We had to organize ourselves. We are a mass movement. We work at the grassroots, just as your organization. And the idea is to get women out of their homes, let them organize themselves. They need to have a lot of information, a lot of training programs are given so that she's empowered with knowledge and information, and she is able to fight her own fight. Our slogan is also, Jiski ladai uski agwai. If it is my problem, then I will have to come out and fight. So if I, as a woman, are not allowed entry into a sacred space, then I will have to fight it. Nobody else is going to do it. If I, as a Muslim woman, is being denied legal protection, if my husband can divorce me in the middle of the night and throw me out, it is my problem, and I will have to come out and fight against it. So that's been the force behind that. It's my problem. I am a citizen of this country. Yes, I am Muslim. I'm not at all apologetic about being being what I am. Not at all ashamed of the fact that I am a Muslim. But at the same time, I am also having a lot of other identities. I am a Muslim woman. I am an Indian woman. I am a woman. So there are multiple identities to all of us. And the problem with our community or with our society generally is that we tend to create a hierarchy. So the fundamentalists in our community will say कि आप पहले मुसलमान हो, बाद में जो भी हो. But then you have the Hindutva groups who tell us that you have to first prove your nationality and then you are a Muslim or whatever. For us, we believe that we have multiple identities and we are going to assert all those identities, and we are all of that at the same time. So let us not create artificial hierarchies, and let us not divide ourselves. Let us not, in our minds, create this kind of division that, no, as a Muslim, I should not be taking up these issues. Or as an Indian, I have no right to talk about these issues. So that has been our Also in the realm of religious knowledge, no, it is always believed, and it has happened in other communities, that women should be only recipients of religious knowledge. No? So the Pandits will tell us what the scriptures tell us. The Maulanas will tell us what is there in the Quran or not there in the Quran. For us, we said we are not going to listen to the Maulanas. We are not going to go to them. We will do what we think is right. We are as much Muslims as anybody else, and we have a right to interpret our religion the way we want to. So this complete denying the right of the religious groups to tell us what to do and what not to do. And that has helped us. No, instead of engaging with them, fighting with them, trying to convince them, for us, they don't exist. What exists is the women power, our strength in coming together, and our assertion of ourselves as citizens. So we are going to talk to the state directly and demand our rights for a better law, for all that we stand for. So that has kind of helped us a lot.
Anushka, what are your plans?
So I work as a researcher at the MIT Media Lab in Boston. Just for a little bit of context, the Media Lab is one of MIT's main innovation experimental spaces, and it does a whole range of different things. It's the place that came up with Google Map technology and touchscreen technology about 20 years ago. It's also the place that works on fashion and social media. So I work within a group at the lab called the Center for Civic Media, and a lot of our focus is different civic engagement projects around the world. Right now, we're in the process of setting up a MIT-backed production house in Mumbai, where the focus will be creating entertainment content on themes of civic and political change. And I'll explain a little bit more about that and the motivation behind it. Traditionally, we've worked on a lot of civic technology, so things like developing apps or survey tools to allow for citizen engagement. But over time, and especially as we move the focus to India, we have realized that before you can offer the tools, you need to create a motivation for civic engagement. There's a dearth of kind of a sense of duties that one has in a democracy. There's two key obstacles we see in creating that motivation. The first is a complete lack of trust in government and political institutions. This sense of frustrations that, sab log mile hue hai, or that everybody's corrupt. And the second is a lack of knowledge about political institutions. So even if you feel like, okay, I'm bothered by this problem and you want to do something about it, it's usually followed by this question of, but what can I do, especially as one person? A lot of our dinner table discussions or water cooler conversations will end with, a statement, something like the government should provide access to free healthcare or free medicines. It'll almost never be about what you and I can do to pressure the government or push the government to provide that healthcare. And that's really what civics is. So how do we go about addressing these two problem statements, right? And I think that's where we see the role of entertainment in the intersection of civic education. The power of a good story or a fiction to bring an issue to your attention that you might not traditionally care about. How parliament functions, how the judiciary functions. What is the difference in your councillor, MLA, and MP? Modi's name might be everywhere, but fortunately, unfortunately, he's not responsible for everything. So where do we direct that frustration? Bringing out kind of complex solutions that have been implemented in the past and putting that on screen so we can learn from the strategy. The other power of fiction, of course, is the representation of minorities. And this has been proved with several studies that, in a stratified country like ours, in a society like ours, we might not interact with communities from different classes, castes, ethnic and religious minorities as much. But when you're exposed to them on screen, it is proven that your prejudice reduces and your ability to empathize increases. The other massive power of fiction that we see is what we call civic imagination. Often you're so cynical and jaded by the complexity of the problem around you, you don't think anything can change. But if an on-screen representation is able to romanticize the idea of a better, let's say a better Bombay even, for us, we might be a little bit more motivated to act towards that image that we've seen. So this is really the kind of content that we want to create. We want to take it a step further to not just make entertainment with a social message, but to include a lot of the fabulous edutainment research that has happened over the years. So right now, a lot of our research at MIT is focused on, looking at some of the evidence-backed edutainment techniques that people like Albert Bandura, Miguel Sabido have worked on, having like 3 types of characters: a positive, negative, transitional, having a long story arc where you show the consequences of a character's action or inaction. We also kind of focus a lot on formative research. So if we're taking a topic like gender, we have developed this open source news analysis platform where we crunch millions of articles on a daily basis from around the world, and you can really query that database to look at how that topic is represented. So when we looked at gender, and this is some work we did for the Gates Foundation, we looked at how gender issues in India were being spoken about post-2012, post the Delhi gang rape. We found that yes, there was a huge rise in conversation on women's issues, but the framing, the language used to talk about it was primarily from the lens of a crime. It allowed you to put your blame on that unsafe public space or that nameless, faceless person in the back alley who you might be afraid of. It made no connection to patriarchal norms, no connection to preference of sons over daughters, no connection to unequal wages for male and female employees. So kind of that is a gap that kind of research allowed us to identify, that we saw we need to build that into the content. And then, of course, for impact studies, doing things like randomized control trials, where JPAL, which is a research center at MIT, that's really where RCTs came about. It's the home of RCTs. Doing content analysis of scripts, so to see the gender and minority representation in that, again, through an automated way. Some traditional qualitative techniques. So that's a little bit about the kind of content we're trying to create and the method we're trying to use. Yeah, I guess our goal is really make civic sexy again. I don't know how Trump's going to feel about that statement, but that's really what the aim of this endeavor is.
Yeah. Thanks, Anushka. Actually, we know this is just a commencement, bringing all actors, stakeholders together and sounding each other's ideas. I just end with the example, because only today morning I heard in communities that we work. So boys and girls together in groups went to see Padman. Together, like friends together, which was kind of really amazing. I mean, a step forward, because the collective consciousness that I was talking about, it says it's sin to talk about menstruation and all those things, it's only characterless women would talk about that. But then it has pricked that unconscious, actually, and not endorsed that unconscious in a way. So that such things are really, and such efforts are very important. So, anybody wants to make any comment? Or
since we are talking about media and entertainment, I mean, we all know how Muslims are portrayed in the films, television series. I don't even think they exist. I don't watch too many movies. Serials I don't watch, so I don't really know. But I'm sure whatever is portrayed is so different from the lived realities of the community. How Islamophobia is spreading and how it has impacted the communities, the community in India, and how it has so directly impacted Muslim women and her issues. So especially law reform issues are so controversial, they are so politicized, and all political parties over the last 70 years have used Muslim women's issues for their own political gains. So when is going to be the time when Muslim women are able to have justice to themselves? And where are these issues in the media? Is there any movie which talks about Muslim women as she's living today? The characters in the films which are Muslim characters, I don't even remember. I think Chak De was one movie where the central character was a Muslim man. But again, he was so victimized. He had to prove his patriotism at the end of the movie. Or you have the latest example of Padmavat, where Khilji, we don't know how Khilji was, but the current political narrative and the character of the Muslim ancient ruler, it just fits into the current narrative of Muslims being such a bad set of people, such evil people. So in all this, where is the Muslim women? And where are her issues? And what are we as media houses going to do about it?
Given just had 2 points to add to whatever we've been discussing. One is about the male inclusive part of any of the campaigns. This morning we saw Denver's film on the little boys who, bought the packet of sanitary napkins and left it outside the door. Now I've been just analyzing the power of using boys instead of girls. I think it's not a matter of, when Pink came, the film Pink, I was just trying to imagine that if it hadn't been Mr. Bachchan, and it had been a woman, as would have been the cliched perhaps way of casting, it would not have had the impact that it had. It's because it was a revered figure like him. So I think we need as women to be as selfish as possible and use whatever gender, whatever color, whatever way we have, if it is going to give out the right message. That's one point. And yes, I'm going to do a little humble brag, as someone put it yesterday. In Balika Vadhu, we had quite a battle with the channel because, we were following the linear journey of Anandi, who was married at 8 years into this family. And she, at some point in the story, we wanted to touch the issue of menstruation. What happens when a girl who would most naturally want to go and hug her mother, or she's frightened, or she would want some help, some advice, and she would want to know what's going on with her. It's frightening for most girls, especially those who haven't been warned about it. And that's the case in most families. And what happens to a girl who is in her in-laws' house with this family which believes that at a time like this, a girl should be sleeping on the floor. A girl should be eating separately, making her feel much worse than she was feeling because of her physical state. So we touched upon that issue, and we came in for a lot of mixed response, I would say, from the people. Some parts of the audience felt it was wonderful, some felt it was off-putting, etc., etc. But just trying to give this example that it's also possible, like in the case of Balika, when we, yes, it was initially about child marriage, but we linked it and it became a vehicle for a lot more than child marriage. And that's how organically storytelling needs to unfold if it is to be edutainment, and especially on private channels, I would say. Thank you.
I guess interrelated to this discussion, particularly when we discuss issues related to women and the media. I think the central question which nobody addresses is who is to speak for whom and how. And unless we women take charge and control about our own representation, we will only talk about mainstreaming these issues. And mainstreaming these issues, you are talking into a boys' club, because that's what cricket in this country is. Today also happens to be, it's not World Radio Day, but UNESCO today is discussing community media and the power of radio. And I'm bringing this up because we have CORO representing this panel. Developing listservs, developing community media is a very fine way of taking control of local conversation about many of these issues. And I'll just leave it with like one example, which is when you have a cricket game. I don't know so much about cricket, so I won't comment on cricket, but you have something called phantom football, right? Where there's soccer. You follow the players, and ahead of the game, there is like a whole internet discussion and actually betting on who exactly is going to win the series and who is going to be the star of the show. So overlaying what you have as network TV or cable TV is a whole internet realm which is completely open to take over if we start creating the communities that talk about these same shows, right? So I'll just leave it at that, and I think community media is a very fine way to You will never have the right kind of representation.
I certainly don't represent channels, and I don't approve of everything that goes on inside them, but just an observation that there are times when the channels have said, okay, now we want a Muslim social, a special program based on a Muslim family, probably going to be given the 10:30 slot, because in any case most Hindus will not watch it. So can you write a Muslim social? So they have segregated it. It's not integrated into the stories and the characters which are already ongoing. And if they are, it's just lip service. They're just standing around. They're peripheral characters. They're certainly not woven into the story. That's discouraged.